The moment the wedding planner pulled Madison aside, I knew. Her face turned pale as she whispered something, then stepped back to let the words land. I saw my daughter's expression crumble like a sandcastle in high tide. Her hand instinctively reached for Ryan's, and his brow furrowed as he leaned in, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. The venue called, the planner said softly. They've double-booked. They can't honor your reservation. 3 days before the wedding. Ryan's voice cracked. But we confirmed last week. Twice. How is this even possible? I stood near the back pew of the church, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. On the outside, I was the picture of calm. On the inside, a storm was building with a slow, deliberate churn. This wasn't a scheduling error. It wasn't bad luck or a miscommunication. It was sabotage. The 4th accident in 2 months. First, the caterer went out of business overnight, mysteriously. Then the photographer canceled due to an internal systems failure and kept the deposit. A week ago, the florist said they'd received a cancellation email from Madison's address. She hadn't sent it. And now, the venue. Ryan wrapped his arms around my daughter, who was holding back tears with the quiet desperation of a woman who didn't want to fall apart in front of strangers. I could see it in her eyes, the cracks forming, the doubt creeping in. I placed a hand on her back. We'll figure something out, I said gently. What I didn't say was that I already knew exactly who was behind it. And she was going to find out, very soon, that her games were over. My name is Eleanor Thompson. I'm 48 years old, a senior paralegal at a mid-sized law firm in Portland, and for the past 15 years, I've been a mother first, everything else second. When my husband died suddenly, Madison was only 11. We were on our own after that. No backup plan. No savings cushion. Just a mortgage, a daughter with a broken heart, and a woman who hadn't been in the workforce for over a decade. So I rebuilt our lives brick by brick, took night classes to recertify, worked full-time during the day, part-time on weekends. I missed birthdays, school field trips, and sleep for years. But I never missed showing up for her. And Madison? She never made me regret it. She studied hard, got into a good college on scholarships, and graduated with honors. She landed a job in marketing and fell in love with a kind, thoughtful man named Ryan Blackwell. The first time she brought him home, I liked him instantly. He was attentive, intelligent, the kind of young man who noticed when your water glass was empty and asked questions about your life with genuine interest. I saw the way he looked at my daughter, and I thought, for once, maybe things would be easy. But then I met his mother. Patricia Blackwell was elegance incarnate. Perfect posture, perfect pearls, perfect judgmental smile. She lived in Boston's Beacon Hill, hosted charity galas, and used her last name like a currency. From the moment we met, I could feel the disdain radiating off her like expensive perfume. It wasn't overt. Not at first. But it was there, in the way she said Madison with a pause, in how she called my home cozy with a tilt of the head, in how she spoke over me during the engagement party like I was the caterer, not the mother of the bride. I tried to be civil. I told myself she was just struggling to adjust, that it wasn't easy letting go of a son. But then she pulled me aside that night, champagne glass trembling delicately in her hand, and said something I'll never forget. My son deserves better than a girl from a broken home. This wedding won't happen. She smiled as she said it. Not like someone delivering a threat, but like someone offering a guarantee. That was 6 months ago. Since then, every single part of Madison's wedding plan had come under fire. Venues accidentally cancelled. Vendors lost documents. Deposits disappeared. Contracts were voided with forged signatures or incorrect payment routing numbers. Each incident came with its own perfect excuse, plausible, convenient, and just frustrating enough to sow doubt, not enough to scream sabotage. But I'm not a woman who panics. I work in law. I'm trained to notice patterns, to see structure where others see coincidence. So I paid attention. I documented. I kept records. I didn't accuse. I didn't shout. I just waited. Because while Patricia Blackwell was out there playing puppet master, pulling strings to dismantle my daughter's happiness, she had no idea who she was playing with. She thought I was just the quiet widow from Oregon. She forgot I'd spent 2 decades studying how people get caught. And she was about to get caught, in front of the very people she cared most about impressing. It started with the florist. Madison called me one morning, her voice shaking. They said I canceled the order, she whispered, like saying it any louder would make it more real. I didn't, Mom. I swear I didn't. I believed her instantly. Madison wasn't the type to forget or miss details. She had spreadsheets for everything, down to how many stems of eucalyptus would line the aisle. And she adored that florist. She'd cried when she saw the sample bouquet. There was no way she canceled anything. I called the shop myself. The manager was apologetic, confused. We received an email from the bride's address confirming cancellation. Full refund was processed. I asked them to forward the email. The wording wasn't Madison's. I knew my daughter's tone, her punctuation. But it was her signature. Her name. Her email address. 2 days later, the photographer backed out, claimed a personal emergency. Wouldn't return our calls. Deposit gone. No explanation. And then came the caterer, bankrupt. Vanished overnight. No website. No way to reach them. If it had been one thing, I might have believed it. But 3? That wasn't bad luck. That was a pattern. So I started digging. And what I found confirmed everything I already suspected. I checked email headers, metadata. I compared sentence structure between the forged cancellation and Patricia's past emails. Identical phrases. Even the same double spaces after periods, something Madison never did, but Patricia always did. Then came the calls. I had a contact at the florist, a girl named Haley who'd interned with my firm's marketing team the previous summer. She told me, quietly, that a woman had called weeks ago pretending to be Madison's mother, asking about switching flower colors. She had a very clipped East Coast accent, Haley said. Honestly, I thought it was you at first. Until she mentioned being from Boston. Next was the bank statement. My colleague in accounting helped me trace a transfer, $3,000 sent to the wedding planner's personal Venmo, 2 weeks before the venue mistakenly double-booked. The sender's account name? PB Holdings. Patricia Blackwell. I stared at the screen, a cold numbness creeping into my bones. She wasn't just trying to sabotage the wedding, she was bribing people to ensure it didn't happen. She was impersonating Madison. She was erasing my daughter's voice, her autonomy, her future. And she was doing it with manicured fingers and practiced innocence. I thought about confronting her. Calling her. Screaming. But I didn't. Because Patricia wanted chaos. She wanted the image of a distraught daughter, a frazzled mother, a wedding unraveling like cheap ribbon. She wanted drama, something to point to and say, see? She's not good enough for my son. So I gave her silence instead. And behind that silence, I began to build something better. I started calling people. Quietly. Carefully. First, I reached out to Judge Thornton, a retired federal judge whose granddaughter I once helped get out of a nasty lease situation. I reminded him of that favor. He agreed to officiate. Then I called Mr. Hamilton, one of the firm's senior partners. He owned a private estate by the lake, a sprawling property rarely used, with manicured gardens and a stunning gazebo. When I explained the situation, he offered the venue with a quiet chuckle and said, "Time to put that trust fund family in their place, huh?" Finally, I reached out to the editor of Boston Elite magazine, a woman named Claire whom Patricia had spent years trying to impress. Claire and I had met at a charity event once and bonded over the absurdity of old money drama. When I told her what had happened, she said, "Oh, Eleanor, send me the address. I'll make sure we send our best photographer." Everything started falling into place. In 72 hours, I replanned the entire wedding, venue, catering, floral design, photography, transportation, guest notifications. I tapped into every professional favor I had banked in 20 years. By the end of day 3, Madison still believed the wedding was off, and Patricia thought she had won. But they were both about to be surprised. Especially Patricia. Because tomorrow morning, she was going to open her mailbox to find something waiting for her. A heavy, cream-colored envelope, elegantly addressed in gold calligraphy. Inside, a formal invitation. You are cordially invited to the marriage of Madison Thompson and Ryan Blackwell. To be held at the Hamilton estate, officiated by Judge William Thornton. Coverage provided by Boston Elite magazine. And clipped to the top corner, a sleek USB drive. It contained audio recordings of her impersonating Madison, screenshots of the forged emails, proof of the wire transfer to the wedding planner, and a simple, handwritten note in my neatest penmanship. The wedding is happening, Patricia. The only question is whether you'll be welcome there. That night, after I sealed the envelope and handed it to the private courier with instructions for morning delivery, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the Portland skyline. Rain tapped softly against the window, and the city glowed in a kind of quiet defiance, lights flickering on through mist, the world still turning even when things felt upside down. I could have called Madison. Told her everything was back on. That I'd fixed it. But I didn't. Not yet. She deserved a moment to breathe. A moment to cry if she needed to. To let go of the weight she'd been holding since this entire ordeal began. I knew what I was doing would lift it soon enough, but first, I needed to finish the final step. Because this wasn't just about fixing a wedding. It was about delivering a message. Not just to Patricia, but to Madison, too. A message that said, you were never unworthy. You were never small. And you are not alone. I stayed late at the firm that night, reviewing every last document, cross-checking timestamps, organizing everything on the USB into folders labeled clearly, forged emails, call transcripts, bribery transfers. This wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. Precision. A lesson I'd learned from 2 decades in litigation support. If you're going to tell the truth, tell it completely. At 11:42 p.m., I made one final call. Not to confront Patricia. Not to threaten. I called the security manager at the Hamilton estate. Confirmed that our event was locked in. That all staff had been vetted. That no access would be allowed without formal invitation. No surprises, I said. Not unless we're the ones planning them, he replied. When I finally got home, the house was dark. Madison had gone to bed hours earlier. I peeked into her room anyway. She was curled on her side, her wedding binder still open next to her, covered in notes and crossed-out to-do lists. She'd tried so hard to hold everything together. She shouldn't have had to. I reached over, gently slid the binder shut, and placed it on her desk. Then I kissed her forehead like I had when she was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. Sleep, baby girl, I whispered. It's all coming back together. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since this nightmare had started, the balance had shifted. Patricia thought she had power because she had money. Because she had influence. Because she thought our silence meant surrender. But she'd underestimated something far more dangerous than status. A mother who had receipts. And tomorrow morning, when that envelope landed in her manicured hands, she would learn exactly what it meant to push a woman who had spent her entire life preparing for a moment just like this. Not to destroy someone, but to defend what mattered most. The next morning, Patricia Blackwell opened her wrought iron mailbox as she did every day, standing in her silk robe on the stone walkway of her Beacon Hill estate, coffee in one hand, disapproval practically radiating from her pores. She was a woman who expected symmetry, control, obedience. The world, in her eyes, was a stage and she was always centered, perfectly lit. But this morning, her hands trembled. The envelope was thick. Cream-colored. Weighty. Her name, handwritten in elegant gold ink, curved across the front with the same formality as a court summons. She knew this wasn't junk mail. She took it inside, sat at the marble breakfast bar, and opened it with deliberate slowness, like one might defuse a bomb. The wedding invitation was the first thing she saw. Madison Thompson and Ryan Blackwell are pleased to invite you to celebrate their wedding at the Hamilton estate. Officiated by Judge William Thornton. With exclusive coverage by Boston Elite magazine. She blinked. Read it again. No, this wasn't possible. The wedding was cancelled. The venue was gone. Everything had collapsed. She flipped the card over. There was more. Paperclipped to the corner was a silver USB drive. Neatly labeled. Below it, a folded sheet of monogrammed stationery, written in ink she instantly recognized. Patricia. The wedding is happening. And it's happening bigger, louder, and more beautifully than you ever imagined. The only question is whether you'll be welcome there. Eleanor. Her face flushed. The cup of coffee trembled slightly in her grip as she stared at the drive like it had teeth. She plugged it into her laptop. Folder by folder, the evidence unspooled. Audio recordings, her voice, unmistakably impersonating Madison. Screenshots of emails, worded carefully, signed fraudulently. A PDF of a bank transfer, $3000, traced directly to a private account she thought no one knew existed. Even a transcript from a florist call, annotated by Eleanor herself. By the time she finished watching, her face was pale. Her jaw locked. She didn't call. She didn't respond. Because she knew. She'd been caught. Back in Portland, I spent that morning making final arrangements. Hamilton Estate had transformed overnight. White peonies lined the garden paths. The gazebo was draped in soft ivory chiffon, sparkling under the morning light. Catering trucks were arriving one by one. Claire, the editor from Boston Elite, was already setting up her team, tripods, drone cameras, press lanyards swinging as she smiled and shook my hand. This is going to be a feature, she whispered. I've covered Rockefellers with less elegance. By noon, guests were arriving, some confused, others awed. They'd all received updated invites, courtesy of my office assistant and a rush order from the city's best print studio. No one asked what happened. They could feel the upgrade. Madison hadn't seen it yet. She thought she was coming for a backup photo shoot, something small and quiet to salvage the weekend. That's how I'd convinced her to put on the dress, to trust me one more time. When the car pulled up and she stepped out, the silence was electric. Madison's mouth opened slightly as she took in the estate, the rows of chairs, the floral arch, the soft strings of the quartet playing in the distance. Her eyes swept the crowd, then found me, standing just beside the aisle, tears quietly waiting in my own. She looked like a queen. Not a bride, a queen. Mom, she whispered. I stepped forward and took her hands. You're not here for photos, I said. You're here to walk down that aisle. She shook her head, laughing through tears. How? How did you do all this? I told you, I said. Let me handle it. Judge Thornton officiated the ceremony with grace and humor. Claire snapped photos as the sun set over the lake, casting gold across the water. Guests clapped. People cried. Love showed up, despite everything. And Patricia? She arrived late. She stood at the back, in a stiff navy suit, hands clenched around her clutch. Her name was not on the reserved list. She wasn't seated with family. She wasn't acknowledged in the ceremony or the speeches. But I made sure she could see it all. Every vow. Every tear. Every unshakable moment that proved she had failed. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't make a scene. She just stood there. Silent. Watching. And when the ceremony ended and the music swelled, she turned and disappeared into the shadows of the parking lot. Later that night, when the party slowed and the cake had been cut, Madison pulled me aside. "You knew," she said. I nodded. "You knew she was behind it all?" I nodded again. 4 weeks. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her, my daughter, radiant in her gown, standing under strings of fairy lights, married, whole. "Because you didn't need the noise," I said softly. "You needed a wedding. Not a war." And she wrapped her arms around me like she was still 5 years old and I'd just fixed her broken toy. Only this time, it wasn't a toy. It was her future. And I'd defended it with everything I had. That night, long after the last guest had left and the last champagne glass had been cleared, I stood alone at the edge of the lake behind the Hamilton estate, heels in hand, toes curled into the grass. The moon reflected off the still water like a coin dropped from heaven. Somewhere behind me, Madison was dancing barefoot with Ryan under a canopy of fairy lights, her veil gone, her curls loose, her laughter real. It was over. And it was perfect. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. Not the shallow, measured kind of breath I'd been surviving on, but the deep, soul-cleansing kind that comes after holding your ground in a quiet war no one else saw coming. Patricia had left without a word. I saw her at the reception for exactly 5 minutes. She stayed near the exit, standing awkwardly in a corner, wine untouched, eyes scanning every detail like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She didn't approach Madison. She didn't speak to Ryan. She didn't dare meet my eyes. She didn't have to. The message had been delivered, signed, sealed, and framed in 5x7 magazine-ready glamour. Boston Elite posted the first image before the night was even over. A lakeside wedding that rewrote expectations, inside the private ceremony of the summer. The story ran the next morning with a full photo spread. Madison laughing as her bouquet soared into the air. Ryan tearing up as she walked down the aisle. Me, arm in arm with my daughter, halfway down the stone steps, eyes locked forward. Not a single photo included Patricia. A few society blogs noticed. One even posted a captioned shot of her standing alone in the distance, labeled uninvited presence. She'd spent years building her image. One envelope had undone it. But I wasn't celebrating her downfall. I wasn't built for vengeance. I was built for protection. And this wedding hadn't just been about flowers and seating charts. It had been about proving that no matter how much wealth or control someone thought they had, they could not outmaneuver the love of a mother who had already buried a husband, raised a daughter, and walked through fire just to watch her smile again. Madison found me near the dock, still barefoot, still smiling. She slipped her hand into mine. No words, just a squeeze. "We did it," she whispered. "No," I said gently, turning to face her. "You did it. You showed up with love and grace and courage. I just made sure the world stayed out of your way." She leaned into me, her head on my shoulder. "I don't know what I ever did to deserve you," she murmured. "You were born," I said. That was enough. Behind us, the band struck up a soft jazz tune. Guests began gathering their things. The fairy lights flickered above like stars unsure of where to land. And I stood there, with my daughter, surrounded by everything she'd built with heart, and everything I'd defended with quiet fire, knowing that while Patricia might have tried to stop this day, she had only made it more unforgettable. 1 month after the wedding, a cream-colored envelope arrived at my office, this time addressed to me. Inside was an advanced copy of Boston Elite magazine's summer issue. The cover headline was printed in gold foil. "A wedding worth fighting for, the Hamilton estate ceremony that stole the season." There they were, Madison and Ryan, under the floral arch at sunset, her gown catching the light just so, his hand gently around her waist. In the corner of the image, almost out of focus but unmistakably there, was me, standing quietly, smiling, tears in my eyes. I stared at that image for a long time. Not because it was glamorous, or because it was being printed in a magazine so many women Patricia's age had obsessed over for decades. No, I stared at it because it captured the exact thing she tried to destroy. Joy. Stability. Belonging. It hadn't just been a wedding. It had been a declaration. My daughter's future would not be dictated by anyone else's bitterness, no matter how wealthy or well-connected they thought they were. I never heard from Patricia again. She didn't call. Didn't send a letter. No apology. No explanation. And I didn't need one. Madison FaceTimed me from Santorini a few weeks later. She and Ryan had found a tiny rooftop cafe overlooking the water. She was glowing, sun-kissed cheeks, hair loose from the breeze, a glass of wine in one hand. "Mom," she said, almost in a whisper, "I think this is the first time in my life I've felt safe." I didn't respond right away. I just smiled. Let her speak. Let her feel what safety tasted like. Then I said, "Good. That's what I've been building for you. One battle at a time." After they returned home, I found myself at the kitchen table one evening, sorting through old papers. Tucked between legal notepads and utility bills, I came across a letter I had written to myself 15 years earlier, the night my husband died. It wasn't long. Just a few lines scribbled on the back of a bill envelope. But I remember every word. "I don't know if I can do this. I only know that I have to. Because she needs me to be unbreakable when the world falls apart. Because I promised I would never let anyone hurt her." I folded the letter and slid it back into the drawer, smiling. I had kept that promise. Patricia hadn't destroyed Madison. She hadn't stopped the wedding. She hadn't even scratched the surface of what it meant to be part of our family. She had power. But I had reason. She had money. But I had evidence. She had status. But I had something she'd never understand, resolve born from love. And that will always win. I'm not a woman who believes in revenge for the sake of pain. I believe in precision. In timing. In truth told so clearly it cannot be argued with. I believe in peace earned, not through violence, but through unwavering clarity. That's what I gave Madison. Not just a wedding. But a lesson in how to protect what you love without destroying yourself in the process. She still has her dress hanging on the door of her closet. Every time I visit, she jokes, "Can you believe we actually pulled it off?" And I say, "Of course we did. And we started on time." She laughs, and that laugh is worth every minute I spent fighting behind the scenes. Sometimes people ask me what I would have done if Patricia had come clean. If she had apologized. If she had begged forgiveness at the ceremony. I think about it. And I think I would have thanked her. Because she reminded me who I am. Not just a mother. But a woman who's lived through loss, raised a daughter alone, and learned that love and quiet power are not mutually exclusive. She tried to sabotage my daughter's joy. What she broke instead was her illusion of control. And that, in the end, was all I needed. Because the greatest form of revenge is standing in the back of a lakeside ceremony, barefoot, quiet, smiling. While the people who tried to bury you realize you were the roots. And you were never going anywhere. And that's how I learned that silence isn't weakness. It's strategy, when used by someone who's prepared. Has someone tried to destroy a joyful moment in your life? Tell your story in the comments. Like this story? Subscribe to EN True Tales for a new revenge story every day. And send this to a mother who'd burn down the world to protect her daughter.